Hi. In this video, I'm going to go through the changes in version 1.22 of Flightplan Visualizer. This version have been a long time underway. 1.21 was released more than a year ago. And the reason for this long wait is partly because I've been working on a new feature set. I'm not ready to release yet. I spent a lot of time with that. But another reason is at some point, Flightplan Visualizer lost its connection to the AIG flight plans. And the reason it did that was when AIG released the AI traffic for Microsoft Flight Simulator, they had a lot of new users. It meant that the servers was hit with a high demand, and they had to move to a completely new server setup. So for a long time, I was waiting to see what that meant to Flightplan Visualizer. If it would be possible to have contact to the new servers. And sadly, AIG could not offer that anymore. And then I was weighing my options, what to do. And while doing that, I put Flightplan Visualizer on the back burner, and I spent some time working on a bit other projects. But I finished a new version of that other project some months ago, and I returned to Flightplan Visualizer. Sadly, I had to remove the menu item to download flight plans. It's no longer possible to download flight plans directly from Flightplan Visualizer. If you download them in using other means, you can still import them. Also, as I disclosed on the forum, one of the new features I added to this version was support for airline-logos. And I had made a feature to download those airline logos from AIG servers directly. And that feature also went out the window when Flightplan Visualizer lost connection to the AIG servers. So I had to implement another way to make those logos work. The installer for this version 1.22 comes with 300 logos I have made, and it's logos that was, at least at the time I made them, was not available from AIG. And also the usage of the logos are different from AIG and for Flightplan Visualizer. For example, AIG, they make a logo for each traffic file they make. So for example, if they make a traffic file for Turkish airline cargo, they need a logo for that. But the logo I need here for Flightplan Visualizer is simply the logo for Turkish airline, because there is not a special cargo logo. And also, for example, AIG, they need to have a logo for Delta Connection. It's flights that are where Delta Airlines are the carrier, but the operator are many small airlines. So they don't need the logos for those small airlines, but we do here in this program, because we both show the logos for the carrier and the operator. So as I said, the installer comes bundles with 300 logos. More than 300, and I will make a separate download containing plus 1400 logos, and those logos are also available if you have AIG AI Manager installed. If you have that installed, you can simply tell the settings where to look for those logo files, and then you will not need a separate download. You can simply take them from there. This version also comes bundled with almost 1,600 flight plans. Since the last release more than a year ago, new flight plans have come, and a lot of flight plans have been updated. So these are bundled with this version. Also in this version, many of the database have had a lot of additions and changes. As I will show later in this video, make runways have some issues with Unicode letters, and it means the airport names and the cities of those airports you import into Flightplan Visualizer, they sometimes show with a strange name with a lot of strange letters, and that's simply because it have issues with Unicode. So in this version, I made it so that if I detect wrong letters in the names, I will instead use the names from the database I supply, and that's the reason I went through this database to make sure it have more airports, and those airports it have are spelled, using the correct letters, because the database for version 122 also had some issues with Unicode letters in the airport names, city names, that have been fixed in this version. The database for aircraft have been updated. For example, the A320, A321, and A330. They come now in cargo versions, in P2F versions, passenger to freight conversions. There are freight versions of the CRJ 100-200s, and I made it more easy for the program to detect flights using the Boeing 700 and 800 in a cargo configuration. So many of the flight plans have been updated because they were wrongly using the passenger version, but now they use the freight versions of these. I will, in this video, go through many of the things changed in this version. But if you want to see the full picture, you should head to the About box, where you can read the full history. First, I list the new things and what have changed. Then I list things I have found that had an issue that have been fixed. And last is about these changes to the database files. In the past, the installer would never overwrite any flight plans with the same name. It meant if you never moved your flight plans to other folders when you did an import, if the flight plans with the same name, it means they had to be from the same season. They would not be overwritten. Normally, it would not be an issue if it's the same season, but AIG are actually updating their flight plans. In cases I have seen the same season being in 5 or 6 revisions, a new revision of the same flight plan for the same season. It can be errors they detected, but also it can be they have had support for new aircraft. They changed that. I don't know if this case, but it could be. In the past, it would never overwrite flight plans. This version, from this version, the installer will. So it's not an issue, because I guess most users are not importing flight plans themselves. But if it's an issue for you, it means you need to pay more attention to the management of the flight plans. In the video recorded for version 111, as written here, a lot of that video is regarding flight plan management. And simply I go through how to use this enable, disable flight plans, how you can make folders, how you can move files, and so on. I am thinking about recording a new video for this flight plan management, because things have changed. I've added new features and so on. Not in this version, but in previous version. But it's a good idea to watch that video. If you are installing your own flight plans, I urge you to make a backup before you install this version 122. If I use this menu item to open the user data folder, one file you should make a backup of is the one. This one normally is only called user airport redirect, but in this case I have mine prefixed, and the installer will not overwrite this file if it is on your system. So if you want the new one bundled with this version, you should remove the file you have. As I said, normal file name would be without msfs underscore. So either remove it or rename it before you install this version. If you are not installing flight plans yourself, or if you're not running this menu item to reprocess flight plans, it's not important. But if you do, it's a good idea to install a new file. That redirect file, it contains a from ICAO code and a to ICAO code. And the way it works is whenever I import flight plans, it would look for all aircrafts going to this airport and change it to this airport instead. And that's simply because AIG and Flightplan Visualizer or Microsoft Flight Simulator are using different ICAO codes for the same airports. For example, in this case, there are flights from the AIG flight plans that using this ICAO code, but the one I have scanning my Microsoft Flight Simulator scenery, this one is the correct airport. And here you can see, for example, this one, it tells the distance of this airport from the imported flight plans to the airport I actually have in my Microsoft Flight Simulator scenery is only 0.2 nautical miles. So it is the same airport, just using two different names. This file I have updated for the latest world update release from Microsoft Flight Simulator. So these are the airports that you have available in your scenery if you're using Microsoft Flight Simulator. If you're using still Prepared, I urge you to make this file yourself. Simply delete everything and make your own. And it's mentioned in one of the previous videos. Let's see if I can spot which one. Yeah, it's this one for version 1.12, redirection report and reprocess. How to use those two menu items to edit this file and to reprocess them is mentioned in that video. Otherwise, if you have any questions, simply ask on the forum. After you have run the installer, you can choose to rearrange your flight plans. I like to keep my root folder empty, and the installer will always install flight plans into this folder. But as you can see, I have many different. I have my BestJet, my commercial, my defunct, and so on. So I will move files to these folders, and also perhaps you will have files moved to this disabled folder, because for each version, for example, here for 122, I mark which airlines have been marked as defunct. For example, they filed bankruptcy or they changed name or something like that. All of these defunct flight plans will be moved to that disabled folder, and the same. All of these are obsolete flight plans because this version of the installer comes with the new versions of all these flight plans. So all of these have been updated. These names down here is simply because I'm still working on my debug version while recording this video. But again, the video for 1.11 explains how to do this. And if you import your own flight plans, when you have edited this redirect of airports, you should run this reprocess. But again, it's mentioned in the video for 1.12. As mentioned last week in the update on the forum, I noticed that at least on my system, Make Runways had an issue. And also, I said in this beginning of this video that Make Runways have issues with Unicode letters. When it scans the scenery, if the scenery files contain Unicode letters, it will often have some issues. And sometimes those issues are so severe that it inserts chars into the XML that the system deem as illegal chars. For example, I had an issue with this CAN 9 airport. These letters shown here with reversed colors, it's an illegal char. If I place my cursor here and tap the right arrow key once, you see it tap through all these. So it appears to be 3 chars, but it is actually only one Unicode char that is illegally formatted in this file. So when you try to use this file generated by Make Runways, Flightplan Visualizer will simply show an error, and it will refuse to import that file. In the past, you had to edit this file. As shown down here, it's the exactly same airport. I have just inserted this name without this issue. Then I can save the Runways files. This is a special file, but you will do it in the Runways.XML file. You can remove those illegal chars, and then you can save the file, and Flightplan Visualizer will be able to import it. So in previous version, you had to do this. Either you had to roll back to another Runways XML file without this issue, or you would simply have to edit it by hand, as I have done here down here. In this version, a Flightplan Visualizer will detect if this happens. It will try to import the make runways as one large XML file. And if that throws an error, for example, because of such an illegal char, it will inform you it was not able to read the entire file, and it will ask you if you want to enable a new setting called robust XML, Runways XML import. When enabled, it will instead generate these sections as many small XML files, one XML file per airport. It will then import all these files. If a single file have an issue, it will go through this text, and it will remove all the chars it deems not safe. Actually, they will be replaced by a hash mark, and that hash mark is an information to Flightplan Visualizer that if Flightplan Visualizer in its airport database have this airport, it will then use the airport name and the city name from the database instead of here from this file. And it means that it should be able to fight these issues with these Unicoded letters. So let's see how Flightplan Visualizer will try to will detect this issue with this illegal letter when we start the program. Here we see the splash screen, and now we have the error message. It tells that an error occurred. It can happen due to illegal chars, which is the case here. And it asks us if we want to enable robust reading and try again. If we choose no here in the Danish version, it will not be able to import it, and all airports will be seen as pseudo airports, as airports that does not exist in your simulator. So we choose yes, we want to enable robust reading of that file, and it will simply try to read it in many pieces, as mentioned before, as one big file. As you see now, everything is imported, and since you don't see these as gray markers, it is actually these airports have all been imported now. If we go to the settings, you see that this use robust runway XML reading have been enabled. That's why we answered yes. And if we use a show log, we can see here was the error generated. We are not able to read it. And we can see the user decided to enable this robust reading. And we see here there is a warning. While importing this one, it detected an issue, but it did, in fact, import this airport. As I said, it just marked those letters that it doesn't like. They are marked as a hash code, and then it will try to see if it can look up that airport in the database I supply with the software. I'm not sure this airport will be here, but it's now imported, and as you can see, it has a hash mark in that name because it was that illegal Unicode letter that's replaced with a hash mark now. As mentioned, one of the new features enabled this version is Airline-logos. In the beginning, I was able to import them directly from AIG, but this is no longer the case. What you can do now is to specify where, if you have AIG AI Manager installed, the logos it download for those flight plans, and in many cases that will be logos for airlines, they are available from this folder. And now you can simply tell Flightplan Visualizer where it can find these these logo files. Also, as mentioned before, the installer come bundled with 300 airline logos that you can choose to install. And also there'll be a separate, if you don't have AIG AI Manager installed, there'll be a separate download only for airline logos. These airline logos come in a special format for this program, so you cannot use them for anything else. These logos come in a special format called .cal, and that's short for Cast Airlines logos. So you cannot see their logos. Here I have some third party I made myself. These are not available for download. These are my personal files. These are still in the PNG format. And the way it works, if you have a file both in the CAL format and the PNG format, it's the PNG that's take priority. So if for some reason you don't like one of the airline logos that I bundle with the program, you can do your own. If you do your own, it needs to be in a special size. It's written on the forum. There is a posting about this. But the size should be not wider than 550 pixel and not taller than 250 pixel. And you should keep the aspect ratio of the file. So if you have a tall logo, it should be 250 tall and it will have a less width. If it's a wide logo, it will be 550 pixel wide, but less than 250 pixel tall. And all of these logos you can see different places in the software. Here, when I enable the airline search and I check this checkbox must be in use, we only see airlines for which we have flight plans. And I don't know how good it looks on YouTube video, but here I just press and keep the arrow down key pressed. And you can see for most of these, there will be a logo. Not for every airline, and some of the logos might not be the most recent for that airline. Updating these logos will not be the most important thing for me. In future updates, I might add a few, but I will be concentrating about writing software and not updating these logo files. But as you can see, there are many logo files here available. And if I choose to view the airline info, we see the logo here in a larger version. For example, if we use this one, you can see that it's wider. It doesn't take up, the logo could potentially fill this area, but it's been, to keeping aspect ratio, it's 550 pixel wide, but not 250 pixel tall. And if we instead look at this one, you will see it is 250 pixel tall, but it's not 550 pixel wide. All of these logos are based on PNG logos, so they're transparent logos. So here we just see the background behind them. If you do JPEG photos, JPEG logos yourself, they will not be transparent, so they will see whatever color you put in the JPEG. So for the best result, you should use PNG files. You can make them smaller or larger than I have made them here with the 550 and 250. But just know that they will be scaled, so perhaps they'll not look as nice as these does. If you want to make your own logos, for example, this one is an airline that's in use, but we don't have a logo for it. In order to use that logo, you need to use a special naming scheme. It's mentioned on the website. But let's just, the way to name those logos. First, it's the ICAO code, then an underscore, then the name of the airline without spaces, and then underscore logo, and I would make them as PNG files. So if I make a logo with this name and I put it into that folder we saw before, this one called logo cache, it will be loaded by the software and it will be displayed next to that file. You will need, while my program is running, if I add that logo now, you will not be able to see it until next time you start the software. And that's because it scans that logo cache folder only on startup. So you should perhaps, as I did here, write down in Notepad or something which logos you want to make, then make them, install them to that folder, and then start up the software again afterwards. But as you saw, most of the airlines that are in use, they will have a logo associated with them, especially for all the larger airlines, but also many of these, for example, these BZ or business jet flight plans, and even for them, many of them, there will be logos available. In this version, logos are not so important. You will see it here. You will see it when you view the airline info. I think you will see it here also. Yeah, you'll see it here when you import a flight plan. If it detects the airline used up here, it will be shown here. It will not be shown for each of these aircraft where the carrier and the operator have set, but it's a feature added to the new things I'm working on for Flightplan Visualizer, where they'll be more important to have these logos, but a few places they'll be visible here. In previous version, when you looked at the traffic for an airport, you will see the traffic for that airport based on your search down here. For example, either you have chosen a flight plan or you performed a leg search. So if I look for the traffic for Copenhagen, when I look here, I'll see there is a daily average of 12 aircraft, 12.14 aircraft, and that's based on my selected flight plan on my last search. You can choose to see all flights to and from this airport, but if you did not do anything, it would only show for the selected. I have changed that default value here in this version, or at least I made it possible for you to set it. For all you users that have used an old version, it will be set to this value that... no, that's not true. Sorry, for all users, it will default to this new settings, all flights to from selected airport. So now, when I double-click Copenhagen and I bring up this chart, it will say there is a daily average of 266 flights now. And that's because it shows all flights, not only for this Danish air transport. If I want to see those for only those for the Danish air transport, I have to manually select this one. And it's both what's displayed on this chart field, but also this traffic legs page. Here we see, right now, we see for all airlines. And if I go back here and I choose selected, now we'll see only for Danish air transport. So basically, you can choose what to display by default. In a previous version, this one, 1.17, I added these user aircraft. And they were split in what was at the time called owned aircraft and aircraft type. These owned aircraft have in this version been changed to simulator aircraft. And here you can set up which aircraft you have as flyable aircraft in your simulator. So for Microsoft Flight Simulator, I bought the premium. And the reason I bought the premium was primarily for the airports and not for the aircraft. To be honest, most of these aircraft I have not been flying. I have bought the Aerosoft and I have bought the PMG 377, the Dash 700 and the Dash 800. And the rest are simply the default aircraft I have as flyable. And of those, I have flown the CIJ and Normally, I don't like smaller aircraft, but the TBM I like very much to fly. To be honest, the Airbus, I have not flown it much. I prefer the Boeings, and especially the PMG Boeings I like. So these are the flyable aircraft I have. In that video for 117, I explain how you can create these aircraft, but simply you have to pick a type. Let's say we have a 777-200 PAX. So that's the type I pick, and it will fill out all these fields. But again, it's mentioned in that video. In this version, making these simulator aircraft is not super important. What you can use that feature for is when you perform a leg search. You can choose down here that you will have to only include those aircraft you have as simulator aircraft. Here must have. So now it will only include in my search aircraft I can actually fly. But in that feature I said I'm working on for the future, these simulator aircraft will be very important to have created. But more about this in a future version. In the leg search window, I made a few small changes. In the past, you had this use calc times. Normally, when you see a flight leg displayed in this software, you will see it with the times lifted from the flight plans, but this program will also calculate a time. In most cases, I suggest you use the time from the flight plans. For example, in this case, the AIG AI flight plans. But there are cases that those values are very wrong, and it would be better to use the calc time. In the past, you had this checkbox. You could choose to either unchecked, you'd use the one from the flight plan, otherwise you'd use those calculated by this software. But in this version, you can now set up a percentage. So it's only when the difference between the calc time and the flight plan time is larger than the value you specify here, for example. If the difference is 20% or less, it will use the flight plan time. If it's more than 20%, it would use the calculated time. Here, setting it to 0, it will always use the calculated time. Also, in this version, you can exclude round trips. A round trip is a flight from and to the same airport. And in the past, you didn't have flights like that because the AI traffic could not handle it. But when AIG make their own flight plan format, they were able to insert a flight plan into the simulator. So actually, they could do that, and they're doing that for many helicopter flights. So you have helicopter flights that take off and land at the same airport, and they have specified the flight route from the time it takes off and to the time it comes back. Those data are not available in this software because the software don't have the actual flight plan. They only see it as a departure airport and a destination airport. And that's why that these are simply displayed as great circle lines, because this software don't know how to fly that route. It's not supposed to be a part of this software. This software is simply to show the routes that different airlines have. And for example, you can use it to find inspiration to what to fly. And if you want to exclude those round robin flights, you can do it now with that new checkbox. Here in the aircraft type, we now show this short name. I guess most users don't know the IATA and ICAO codes. If you know them, you can see them here. But otherwise, you see these short names. These short names, I hope, give a better idea of which aircraft it is. For example, if I use these one, you can see a B733 is the 737-300. And here you have it with an F added because it's a freight version, or here with a WL because it would winglets. So many places the software will now use and show these short names. In this version, I updated many of the short names, so hopefully they're more easy to read. For example, here with the Learjets, when you hover the mouse over a route, you will also down here see the short names. Here we have the name for the airline service in this route, and here you have the short name for that aircraft. So when you hover the mouse over the short name, you'll see the full name of that aircraft, but hopefully it will be more easy to read which aircraft it is, instead of showing ICAO codes or IATA code for the aircraft. Also for this view, when you right click and choose view aircraft info, you have this button called usage. And here you will see how it's used, if it's used by any aircraft, or if there are flights, based on the data extracted from these flight plans, you can see which airlines are using them. For example, Air France, they are the carrier and operator of 17 of this aircraft. If you use this form to enable and disable flight plans, you now have selections to choose, select all business jet and all military and all government. And that's simply because all business jets is prefixed by BC, all government with GV, and all military with MI. So you can simply here, if I choose to select all military, it will select all of these because they start with MI. Choosing all business jet, none of them will be selected. So when you have all your flight plans in this folder, it's easy to select all military, then copy them to the military field, go to the business jet, select all business jet, copy them here, and all government, select them, copy them here, and then you know the rest is commercial, so simply select everything and copy them here. Actually, one of my colleagues at work, also into Flight Simulator, he had a request for me that I'm implementing in this version, and that's here with the unit conversion. He would like to be able to convert, so he could enter the GPS as a decimal value and have it shown as degrees, minutes, seconds, or vice versa. And it's possible in this version. Instead of entering, I can look up an airport, for example, EGPK, Prestwick, Scotland. And I have a secondary airport down here. I can look up, for example, Copenhagen. So now we have Prestwick in these two fields, and we have Copenhagen down here. And we can see the distance between those two, and we can see the initial course and the final course of that great circle line between them. And with these buttons, I can change. So if I press this one, it will swap both my latitude and my longitude. Sorry, it will swap them. Yeah, here we can swap again. So now we can enter these values, and it's the initial course changed over here, but we can look them up and so on. So now you have this. Also, this section with the wind speed and direction, it was previously a separate menu item with its own form, but I moved it into this form. So, for example, if you have a runway with heading 120, and you have a wind coming from 145 and a strength of 12 knots, you can see you have a headwind of 10.9 knots, and you have a crosswind 5.1 knots, and it's coming from the right or the starboard side. But otherwise, the rest of this form is unchanged. I mentioned this airport redirect when I mentioned the installer, that I can redirect from this airport to this airport. And normally it will always redirect all flights. In this version, in settings, you now have a max distance. So if you have a redirect, even though it's those ICAO codes you saw in that file, it would only actually redirect it if the distance between the airport from the imported file to the airport from your scenery is less than 20 nautical miles. And for example, if we look for Johannesburg, here, the ICAO code for Johannesburg was for many years FAJS, but it changed some years ago to FAOR. So all old flight plans that had flights into FAJS, they needed to be changed to FAOR if they was actually flights into Johannesburg. But in Microsoft Flight Simulator, FAJS is now in use by this small airport instead. And as you can see here, the distance between these two airports is 400 nautical miles. It means if we import a flight plans that reference FAJS, but it have an GPS location in that file that's less than 20 nautical miles, it will in fact perform that redirect. But if that GPS is actually the GPS location of this Faiz airport, the distance will be 402 nautical miles, and it will not redirect it. And so this redirection have been improved to be better. If there are no, this airport, as I recall, it's not in use by any of the flight plans. No, it's not in use. But if it was in use, those flight would not, they were intended for this airport. They would not be moved to Johannesburg instead. They will actually use this one. So it have improved how that redirection work. When you edit an airport, I had, from the beginning of this software, I had these two fields, the rank and traffic density. And I ranked my airports. It's not so important with Microsoft Flight Simulator because the scenery is looking so much better. But for P3D, you had some really terrible airports where it was only an runway, no building, or very, very generic buildings. You still have generic buildings. Of course, you have that in Microsoft Flight Simulator, but it's not as terrible as it was in the past. And I made this ranking system. I did not rank all my airports, but many of the airports I would rank. If I did a flight and I find out it was a terrible airport, I would mark it as a very simple. And if it was one of those that was improved, I could give it an enhanced status. Or if it was third party I bought that looked really nice, I could give it this third party status. Also with the AI I had installed, I could rank it as if it was very sparse or it was full of AI aircraft. I still use this ranking today. Again, not with all airports, but those I tend to use. But this traffic density, I must admit, I don't use it anymore. So in this version, I decided that you could change these names. You have always been able to change these values that's displayed in the drop-down menu here. But these names, rank and traffic density, they were fixed. You could not change it. And in this version, in settings, here on this second page, these were the 6 values you could change, but now you can also change the name. For example, I want to keep the rank. But if you want to use this one for something completely different, you can now give it a better name. I must admit I don't have a very good example, so let's just call it tests. Save the setting now. When I go to this airport, I will see the name have changed to tests. And always also if I do an Control A to do an airport search, you can change what is displayed over here. And by default, it shows the size, the rank, and the one we renamed to tests. So these are the 3 columns, and you can choose something else. Here you can, that's one of the reasons that we have these fields. I can do here a search for all airports, but I only want to see those that are minimum marked as enhanced and maximum as third party. So now it's only enhanced and third party airports I'll see, and this same filtering I can do with this test. So if you have some meaningful use of this, you can change this name and you can change the values of these to use this feature for something else. So let's go back and restore the old name. When you do a leg search, you can choose to limit your airport size by using the filter. We have this filter manual. It's a PDF file that will open, and you can read it. For example, here it's airports. So we have this airport filter, and we have different things. We can, for example, we can choose by country, CT. So if I actually copy this line and paste it in here, and I here say only DK, and then let's choose that. Country equal DNK, that's Denmark. So it's all flights that's inbound or outbound from Denmark, and they go to an airport that's in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, or Iceland. So when I do a search, I only see, I'm not sure why Iceland, perhaps I'm using the wrong country code, and that's exactly why I make this feature I'm showing. But now we only see these flights, flight between the Nordic countries here. And if you know these 3 letters ICAO codes, ISO names for the country names, it's okay. If you don't know them, there is now a new menu item called country lists. And here you will see all the names of the 3-letter codes and the country they belong to. It will also show the ISO 2 code. But here you can see them. Here they are here they are sorted by the ISO. And down here we have all the countries again, but this time sorted by the name of the country. So if you need to look up those 3 letters, ISO 3 country names, you can find them in this list now, instead of having to open a browser and search the internet. And the reason they are listed is because in this manual, it says down here that all of those letters, all of those codes are not included in its manual. You have the names for the region and the sub-region, but all of the country codes are not listed in this manual. So that's the reason they are now implemented in this menu item. Also, a small change in this version that was important to make is right now there is a good spacing between these routes and the airports. But when you hover the mouse over an airport in previous version, sometime it was very difficult, especially if you have a screen with lots of routes displayed at the same time. For example, hover the mouse over Copenhagen and see this tooltip for Copenhagen was difficult because sometimes it would, even though you were over this balloon marker for Copenhagen, it would choose to show the hint window for all the routes instead. You see now, when I hover the mouse over a route, shortly we'll see this plus mark cursor, and it will highlight that route and show a tooltip for that route. But now the tooltip for the airports take priority, so it's more easy to find and see this tooltip for the airport, because I think that is probably the most important thing to see. So those were the things I wanted to show in this version. A lot of things have happened that you cannot see because, as I said, I've been working on a new feature set. Between the Misc menu and the help menu, there is a completely new menu structure with lots of screenshots, lots of data, lots of functionality. And I have worked on that since the release of the previous version, but it's not ready for release yet. So it will come in a future version. So perhaps you had hoped there would be more features in this version, but as you saw, a lot of flight plans, a lot of data files have been updated. And if you look at the history, you can see many things have been fixed.